We have a special guest with us right now. We're going to cover the Omicron, or you say the Omicron. We should just call it Omicron. Today's guest is the editor of the investigative journalism website, The Gray Zone, ladies and gentlemen. He is the author of such books as Goliath, The 51-Day War, and The Management of Savagery. He co-hosts the Moderate Rebels podcast alongside Ben Norton. Please welcome Max Blumenthal, ladies and gentlemen. Hi, Max. How are you?
Pretty well. How are you doing?
Good. Well, I got to tell you, your article stirred up a lot of controversy. The Gray Zone did an article about the dangers of lockdowns and how they are oppressive to the poor and the working class, I just think, in general. And they make everybody a little less mentally stable. Some people, so much so they commit suicide. So there's a lot of deleterious effects, unintended consequences from lockdowns. And now there's the Omicron variant, which is scaring some people because we showed you this, right? Someone tweeted out another Omicron case is detected in the U.S., this time in Minnesota. Wow. So that's, oh my God, another. And then someone says, oh, and that's that. We need to lock down now. Now, of course, we made fun. That's hysterical. It's a hysterical reaction. It's laughable. Because this is by the way, this is from December 3rd. This is what the Reuters was saying on December 3rd. Could Omicron variant bring milder illness? Even back then, when was this tweet from? I don't have the date on it. Son of a bitch. Anyway, and here's what they were saying on December 3rd, that among 70 cases reported in Europe that included information on disease severity, half of the patients had no symptoms. And the other half had mild symptoms, according to the report on Thursday by the European Center for Disease Prevention and Control. This is from a report on the 3rd of December. Today's the 8th. There were no cases of severe disease, hospitalization, or death. However, the European agency said it would require data on hundreds of cases to accurately assess disease complications, estimating that could take several weeks. In addition, most cases detected in Europe so far have been in younger people who were fully vaccinated, making them less likely to suffer severe illness. Now, here's what they're saying now. This is from today. This is from December 8th. Cite a sigh of relief in South Africa as Omicron variant appears to be super mild mutation with COVID death rate not jumping. The WHO and coronavirus experts are increasingly convinced the new Omicron variant is super mild and has so far not led to a jump in COVID death rates anywhere in South Africa. The WHO is calling this morning for the countries to drop travel restrictions and end the mass hysteria, and instead be cautiously optimistic as more and more reports out of South Africa suggest the new Omicron variant is not more lethal than the previous Delta variant. In fact, there have been no reports of hospitalizations or deaths as a result of anyone being diagnosed with Omicron. Well, Max, that seems to vindicate your call for people to stop overreacting and employing lockdowns at the drop of a hat, does it not?
I don't need the Omicron variant to vindicate the lockdown piece that we published at the Gray Zone, because we clearly demonstrated what so many millions around the world have experienced, which is that the cost of lockdowns has been worse than the cost of COVID itself. That the cure, the supposed cure, the prescribed cure that flowed out of these from these institutions, these bullshit factories like the Imperial College in London, and were handed down to mindless hacks like Boris Johnson and Bill de Blasio and Donald Trump and Joe Biden. They caused so much more livelihood destruction than the virus itself. So that's separate from the Omicron variant. The Omicron variant is apparently the worst fear of many of the people behind the new normal. But it's a relief to the general public. And just having, spoken to people of all different political persuasions and walks of life about this in the past few days, there is just a consensus that there's a relief that this is based on the reporting and based on the comments of St. Anthony Fauci, that this is more mild than the other variants. It's more mild than Delta. What we see out of South Africa, hospital data showing no deaths, less medical intervention necessary in ICUs for Omicron cases, that almost all of them are mild. Fauci himself has said it appears to be more mild. But yet we see the Pfizer CEO, Albert Bourla, complaining in an interview with the Wall Street Journal that the mildness, the reported mildness of this variant is not good news. It's rapidly transmissible, which seems frightening, but it is mild. Now, why would that frighten or upset Albert Bourla? Obviously, it threatens to make his call for a fourth vaccine, a fourth booster, less appealing. The fear factor goes down. Therefore, the profit margins go down. These big pharma CEOs have made something like $10 billion since the announcement of Omicron. So this is the most cynical statement he could make. And actually, the transmissibility combined with the mildness is terrible news for him, because as Vladimir Putin, the Russian president, said yesterday, this could amount to what specialists tell him is a live vaccine, where essentially people who get infected with the Omicron variant receive what they would otherwise get from a vaccine, but with more immunizing effectiveness, because we know natural immunity is more effective. Listen, the vaccine is supposed to make the effect, the virulence of the virus more mild, right? And it doesn't prevent transmission necessarily. It is a non-sterilizing vaccine. So here you have a variant or a mutation spreading rapidly in the population, infecting masses of people, but not causing masses of deaths, theoretically speaking. That would terrify me if I were the Pfizer CEO who is seeking to ride this out indefinitely and keep the fear factor cranked up forever. It might also frighten me if I were Anthony Fauci, who has become a celebrity and a hero to so many who have been seduced and hypnotized by the new normal ideology. So in many ways, the fear here among these figures is less death, less hospitalizations, and it reveals them to be the cynical characters we always knew they were. And again, we don't know what Omicron will necessarily do, but all indications are that it is mild. I should mention that there is a study out of South Africa where the variant was first detected by Angelique. The study is not by Angelique Coetzee, but that's the doctor who discovered it. She said that it appears to be mild, and Western governments are blowing it out of proportion. And now there's been a study of the blood samples of 12 vaccinated, scientists from South Africa grew live samples of this variant and performed experiments to see how it affected antibodies in blood samples from 12 people who had been vaccinated. 6 of these people in this experiment previously had COVID. And what they found was that Omicron was able to escape the vaccine's protection at a much higher rate than the other variants. However, those who had been naturally infected previously by COVID had much greater protection. So again, alarm bells are ringing at Pfizer headquarters here, and this appears to be mild, according to this study as well.
And even Anthony Fauci, by the way, we have to say that the vaccines do reduce transmission, although they don't stop it. They do reduce you contracting it, although they don't stop. Okay, so here's Anthony Fauci, and he is agreeing that the Omicron. Here's how he says it.
Thus far, it does not look like.
Let me turn it up low. Okay.
Thus far, it does not look like there's a great degree of severity to it.
So that's the way he talks. It does not look like there's a great degree of severity to it. He still tries to speak in alarmist language, even though he's telling you something's not bad. It's funny. But here I want to show you, there's an article from, now this is again from today. This is again from December 8th. This is from RT, and it says, could Omicron save us from COVID? What do you mean? Well, let's get into it. While Fauci also says the new variant's mutations appear to have made it more capable of infecting people, that may not be a bad thing if it shows itself to be much less destructive, as Max was saying. In fact, some studies and observations show it could prove to be what some would call a godsend. That's it. Lock it down. That's it. Lock it down. Call my parents in the Hamptons. Lock it down. That is because those who get the new strain could gain naturally enhanced immunity to all the strains. That's what Max was just talking about. So if you get this variant, you get the Omicron, it will give you an enhanced natural immunity to all the strains. That's what they're saying will happen. While the mRNA vaccines only build immunological recognition of the spike protein that has become significantly mutated in Omicron, potentially rendering the vaccine less effective, potentially. Contracting the Omicron variant may result in immunity that broadly recognizes many other aspects of the COVID virus, SARS-CoV-2, for which the mRNA vaccines do not program the body to be on alert, because the mRNAs are programming you to be on alert for the spike proteins. Dr. Angela Coetzee, chairwoman of the South African Medical Association, criticized the West's extreme response to her announcement of the new variant's emergence in South Africa. I have seen a lot over my medical career, but nothing has prepared me for the extraordinary global reaction that met my announcement. This version of the virus has been circulating in Southern Africa for some time. Let me be clear, nothing I have seen about this new variant warrants the extreme action the UK government has taken in response to it. No one here in South Africa is known to have been hospitalized with the Omicron variant, nor is anyone here believed to have fallen seriously ill with it. If, as some evidence suggests, Omicron turns out to be a fast-spreading virus with mostly mild symptoms for the majority of the people who catch it, that would be a useful step on the road to herd immunity, said the doctor who discovered this. Dr. Hauman Hamedi, a PhD research scientist, has even gone as far as to say that Omicron could actually bring on the end of the pandemic. So instead of this being a thing that's supposed to make us shit our pants, like our friend Walker was doing, shut it down now, it's actually the best news we've ever gotten. Hypothetically, if this doesn't cause significant disease or any real major disease whatsoever and happens on the flip side to be highly infectious such that everybody gets it, all of a sudden you can have a scenario where you have a large subset of the population, if not the entire population, who has gotten a mild version or even no version of the disease, but has developed antibodies and has resistance such that ever later on come a more deadly variant, they're going to be protected from it. The professor did note there's one big caveat, which was that it remains to be seen what happens when Omicron infects the elderly, because right now we're just seeing it infect young people. Some studies have actually shown immunity acquired by COVID to be more protective and longer lasting than vaccinated immunity. A study in Israel, one of the most vaccinated nations on earth, examined medical records of tens of thousands of Israelis and revealed that those who had experienced a COVID infection showed stronger protection against the Delta variant than those who had been fully vaccinated. The study's authors specifically recommended you do not try to get infected just because their study shows naturally enhanced immunity demonstrates no detectable shortcomings over vaccinated immunity. So don't have a party and say, let's all try to get the COVID because we'll have better immunity because someone could die. That's what they're saying. In fact, the leaders of the study undoubtedly feel the need to give that warning because the results are seemingly so impressive. After all, this was the largest real-world observational study so far to compare natural and vaccine-induced immunity to SARS-CoV-2. Now, Omicron may naturally provide a far less risky path to that quality of immunity. If so, there is still one big problem. Few people are in a position to know whether they are exposing themselves to Omicron or to a more deadly strain of COVID. And now that the new COVID variant has been detected in almost all regions of the world, millions of poor people in Africa and other nations where the West, for all its promises, hasn't helped them very much, may become accidental beneficiaries of free immunization delivered by Omicron, providing broad immunity to other more damaging forms of COVID. This could happen. Okay. There may even be a chance they could wind up better off than the vaccinated. There's a chance. Travel restrictions may play a role in slightly reducing the spread of COVID-19, but place a heavy burden on lives and livelihoods. And of course, here is your article in the Gray Zone, Flattening the Curve or Flattening the Global Poor, how COVID lockdowns obliterate human rights and crush the most vulnerable. So just want to show this again because this is funny. And that's that. We need to lock down now. That's that. Let's bring Max back. Let's bring Max back here. That was
and that's that.
And that's that.
This is a guy trying to hold himself up as some kind of authority. And you have one Omicron case detected in Michigan, which was either mild or asymptomatic. And epidemiological premature ejaculator Walter Bragman says, that's that. Everybody has to be locked down. That's that.
That's that.
Send all the kids home from school. Let their reading deteriorate by 30 to 50%, especially in underprivileged populations, as we saw across the country. That's that. Let's have 25% of people 18 to 25 reporting suicidal ideation, as the CDC detected in 2020. That's that. Let's have millions of people pushed to the brink of eviction. Let's have millions of people thrown into the ranks of the homeless. That's that. Let's have opioid deaths increased by 50% in West Virginia and 30% nationally because of desperation under lockdown and deprivation. That's that. That's according to epidemiological premature ejaculator Walter Bragman after one asymptomatic or mild case in Michigan. And this is the guy who thinks that he is some kind of expert. And all he is a human manifestation of the neurosis of the COVIDian new normal cult, which has been torturing the entire population and whose main role is to simply push the ruling class to go even further in tormenting people without any public health gain. And when the public health experts and officials finally decide that the virus is endemic and it needs to be treated, those people will still be howling for more and more livelihood-destroying, soul-crushing restrictions. That's that. And we need to say that's that with them, because history is not going to remember these people very well.
Well, just because... So they haven't been able to confirm that this is mild. It's not confirmed yet that Omicron is super mild, but even though nobody's gone to the hospital. But as a precautionary measure, Max, people, I think, should still remain locked in their homes and continue cowering in fear. What do you think?
Well, what we see are governments around the world that are still addicted to restrictions that have proven pointless, trying to ram through as many as possible while they can before the fear begins to dissipate. Most of the British public told YouGov, the polling firm, that they opposed lockdowns. They were strongly against lockdowns. And that was the British government's plan B in order to torture and intimidate the public into supporting vaccine passports, which are also basically medically useless and are a coercive policy designed to coerce people onto the vaccination booster treadmill. So if Omicron turns out to be mild, and again, it's a wait and see situation, but the data coming in, the real world data, is encouraging. And we can say this is endemic and Omicron replaces Delta. Again, we don't know if it will. Then the pandemic is over and COVID-19 becomes like the flu. And this is something that I said would happen the first time you and I discussed this issue several months ago. I said ultimately COVID-19 would have to become endemic and it might ultimately become like the flu and then the pandemic would be over. But by that point, all of these restrictions would be in place and they could stay in place in time for another kind of emergency. And that's the point of all of this, I think, is to reorient the relationship between citizens and the state. We've already seen a large swath of the public accept a completely perverse reorientation of the social contract, whereby a completely healthy sector of the population was defined as a public health threat and publicly demonized because they refused to take a new novel product rolled out by Big Pharma. And so that shifting of the social contract will remain along with all of these restrictions unless there's resistance to them and a recognition of how this virus will likely evolve. Now, the one problem here is how the public has been conditioned through popular culture to understand viruses and mutations. And this is where basic virology needs to be consulted. In the 90s, when the US ran out of enemies, there was no Soviet Union, there was no war on terror. So in Hollywood and in popular, kind of pulp literature, the enemy took the form either of microbes, scary diseases, or aliens. And so you had popular books like Michael Crichton's The Andromeda Strain, which are about viruses mutating and, it was like an extraterrestrial mutates and acquires biological properties to degrade plastic and it escapes all containment. You had the film Outbreak about this scary Ebola-like virus that keeps mutating into this highly infectious strain of aerosolized transmission. It's what people were watching at the beginning of the pandemic that helped freak them out. But the reality about mutations is different. The Nature Public Health Emergency Collection published a really instructive essay, which is on the NIH's website. And it's titled, "We Shouldn't Worry When a Virus Mutates During Disease Outbreaks." And let me just read a little passage from that. "While this amazing capacity to mutate fuels the engine of evolutionary change, most mutations adversely impact some aspect of virus function and are removed by natural selection. Hence, although a mutation that changes how a virus is transmitted or its virulence may readily appear in a virus population, it will not spread to high frequencies unless it is selectively advantageous. So in many cases, mutations result in the virus becoming weaker, even as it becomes more transmissible. And that, to use Fauci's constantly conditional language, which he never gets criticized for, that may mean that this virus, the Omicron variant, it may potentially mean down the road that we could potentially somehow at some point declare an end to the pandemic. Maybe. But we should not be afraid of talk of mutations is my only point. Variants and mutations are not inherently
scary,
frightening.
No, and we had to explain that when the guy from the NIH went on CNN with his little spike protein thing to scare the shit out of everybody. And he made all these scary sounding things, and then he goes, but I don't think it's going to be bad for us. And it was just like, what are you doing? Why would you scare us all first? Apparently in South Africa, that woman who discovered the Omicron variant, she thinks it's mild, and she thinks that we're overblowing this. And I guess it's just because of backward countries like South Africa, medical schools don't train their doctors about the importance of spreading unfounded hysteria.
Well, they care about their population. She lives among South Africans, and they have suffered enormously under the restrictions and the lockdowns, which, as I wrote in my piece with Stavrula Pabst at the Gray Zone about lockdowns, caused something like over 40% of South Africa's population in April 2020 to report that they were without food But now you have Joe Biden declaring reflexively in another act of premature political of political premature ejaculation, declaring a travel ban on all of Southern Africa, including countries like Madagascar, where no Omicron cases had been yet detected. And what does that do to their economies? It hammers their economies. Their economies depend on tourism, especially in the winter season. Europeans often come down there. Their business people are unable to travel. It was a gut punch to an already suffering geographical region, which was trying to pull itself out from the pain of pandemic restrictions. It was a sort of like, I don't know how I could understand people, especially people in Southern Africa, reading this as racist, that they were being collectively banned for a variant that emanated from Europe, apparently. I mean, one of the super spreader events was a South African corporation
in Norway
that I think had a Christmas party in Norway, and everybody who went into the party was vaccinated,
and
but
tested.
they came back with the Omicron variant.
Yep. And I think they all tested negative for COVID before they went into that meeting.
That's right.
Yeah.
That's right.
So here we are again, just like it was predicted on this show by Dr. Robert Malone, and then we've been attacked as anti-vaxxers ever since. He said that the virus is going to mutate, and usually it mutates into becoming more infectious and less deadly. And that's what's supposed to happen. And okay, so he said a lot of other things. Go watch that video with Dr. Robert. It's very hard to find. You have to go to our page. You have to go to our page, and you have to go down our page. Because if you Google Dr. Robert Malone, Jimmy Dore Show, it does not come up. If you put it in YouTube, it doesn't come up. They have suppressed that video, and it still has over 700,000 views. So
I think you have to go through a second certification page where you have to click a button where you confirm that you are a dangerous anti-vaxxer or far-right
That's right.
deplorable conspiracy theorist before being able to access that.
Hey, come see one of our live stand-up shows December 10th or 17th or New Year's Eve at the Two Roads Theater in Studio City, California. See you there. Go to jimmydorcomedy.com for a link for all tickets.